Welcome, we're glad you joined us. Jesus is known by so many descriptions, yet out of all those descriptions, he most frequently referred to himself as the Son of Man. This seems strange to us. What does Son of Man mean?
We need to keep in mind that Jesus lived and died as a first-century Palestinian Jew. And so we need to understand what a Son of Man would have been in the Old Testament and what it would have meant in the first century. When we look into the Bible in the Old Testament, we find three ways in which Son of Man is used. First and foremost, according to its most basic meaning, it's simply a way of talking about a human being. We see this very clearly in the 8th Psalm in verse 4. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? Now in Hebrew there's parallelism, that's the feature of poetry. And so what David is doing is saying the same thing in two ways. Thus, Son of Man is a human. Another way that Son of Man is used in the prophet is described prophets. The prophets Ezekiel and Daniel are both called the Son of Man. But the third and most important use of Son of Man in the Old Testament is in Daniel's vision in Daniel chapter 7, 13 and 14, where Daniel sees one like a Son of Man appearing before the Ancient of Days, where he is given an everlasting dominion. Therefore, a Son of Man is a way of talking about a human, but to call oneself the Son of Man is to associate yourself with that vision Daniel sees of the one like a Son of Man who would receive an everlasting kingdom.
So why do you think Jesus would identify himself as the Son of Man?
Jesus consciously evokes that image of a Son of Man to speak of Daniel's vision. He's styling himself as that one like a Son of Man who would receive that everlasting dominion when he would come before God, the Ancient of Days. And so it's interesting to see he calls himself the Son of Man often when he's talking about the future, especially in terms of the destruction of Jerusalem and when he will finally return again to judge the world. And when he does that, he's not just evoking the Son of Man, but the entire vision of Daniel 7 when he's making his confession before the high priest. And after he died and was raised again and ascended into heaven, Stephen will evoke those same words of Jesus and Daniel's vision. Jesus wants to make it very clear that he associates himself with the one like a Son of Man in Daniel's vision.
So Son of Man is a way of referring to yourself as a ruler. So why refer to Son of Man when he's already sometimes referred to as Christ, Messiah, or King?
That's a great question. It really establishes a timeline for us. Normally a king will live and rule and then die. But Jesus lives, dies, is raised again, ascends to heaven, and then begins to rule. This timeline is implicit in the vision Daniel saw, but it's nowhere else in any of the prophecies of the Messiah. The Son of Man also stresses Jesus' humanity. Notice that Daniel didn't see God the Word, or one like a son of the gods receiving an everlasting dominion. He sees it given to one like a Son of Man. Now this isn't to deny that Jesus isn't God, or something like that, but it's a reminder to us that Jesus remains fully human as well as fully divine. God can't die. Therefore, God can't be raised from the dead. God gave Jesus all power and authority because he could not obtain that power as only the Son of God. So Jesus' self-identification as Daniel's Son of Man highlights his humanity, and it best defines God's plan for him from its beginning. He was to be presented before the Ancient of Days in order to obtain that eternal kingdom and dominion, but he could only do that and get that kingdom through his ministry on earth, his suffering, his death, his resurrection, and then his ascension. And by the way, Jesus is still the Son of Man, still in that resurrection body, ruling from heaven, and he will return in that transformed body on the day he comes to judge the living and the dead.
So how should our view of Jesus be shaped by his status as Son of Man?
Sometimes Christians tend to emphasize Jesus' divinity to the point of neglecting or even forgetting sometimes that he is human. And also it's easy to take the conflict between the flesh and the spirit so as to demonize the physical realm and the physical body. But Jesus is God in the flesh. When he becomes human, Jesus shows that even though the creation has been corrupted by sin, there's still dignity in humanity because God took on flesh. Jesus' present existence in the resurrection is the reason we can have hope for sharing in that resurrection for all eternity. In Christ, God is not far from us, and he's experienced temptation. He's experienced that suffering and death, and therefore he's able to sympathize with us in our weaknesses. In Revelation, when John sees Jesus in terms of the Ancient of Days, the Son of God, he still describes Jesus as the one like a Son of Man. In the New Testament, Jesus is divested of his humanity only between his death and his resurrection. Otherwise, throughout, he is fully God and fully man. Thus he is to this day, and thus he will be forevermore.
Thanks so much for your thoughts on this, Ethan. And thank you for joining us again today for this conversation. Please join us on March 9th, 2014 at 10 a.m. as we further the discussion of Jesus as the Son of Man. Or visit us on our website, VeniceChurchOfChrist.org, for more about this and many other lessons. Have a great day.
I like it.
Have a great day.